Welcome to another episode of Before You Kill Yourself with your host, Leo Flowers. I am Leo Flowers. Today's guest is Sam Grittner, who is a writer and comedian, and we're going to cover so much today. I'm excited about this episode. He's going to talk about the tips he would give somebody for their first time in a psychiatric ward. He talks about overcoming, or I wouldn't even say overcoming, but dealing and managing with his drug addiction. He's had numerous suicide attempts. We're going to talk about what his daily routine is to maintain his sobriety and how he's overcome being heavily indebted due to his addiction, the burden, struggling with the feeling of being a burden of comparing himself to his siblings. I don't know if anybody out there has ever been compared to or compares himself to their siblings, if you have some of that going on. He talks about, meditation and how depression feels different to him than suicidal ideations. What are the differences between those two? And he talks also about how the lack of spirituality in his life is one of the contributing factors to his suicidal ideations and attempts. We get through so much today. I'm excited. And also, of course, we talk about some of the books that he would read if he were in a psychiatric ward. We talk about that and so much more. Let's jump into the episode. And also, thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for rating this 5 stars. I appreciate you. And thank you for the messages. I've been getting a lot of personal messages from you all, so I appreciate it. All right, let's jump into the episode. What's up, Sam? How we feeling, brother?
Feeling a lot of feelings right now. I have to do a COVID test. It might just be a cold, might be allergies. I turn 40 tomorrow, so it might be butterflies. But I'm feeling good. I got the day off. I have today, tomorrow, and Saturday off. I usually work on the weekend. So yeah, life is good.
Now, when you say you turn 40 tomorrow, that's a big milestone, I would imagine. I'm 46, and are you having any preconceived notions about what 40 means?
Yeah. I want, like, my brain is trying to be like all, you know, sprouting around, big man on campus, and be like, no, I'm fine. And like, no, like the past 2 weeks, I've just been asking myself, what does it mean to be 40 for myself? And like, I have a lot of preconceptions and misconceptions. And, I think ultimately, like, something that I've learned over the years is that, or I'm very at peace with now, is like, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be right now. And um, I'm I'm not excited about it, but I'm not afraid about it. Like, it's like the biggest thing for me is that, like, I'm able to take off of work. I'm able to hang out with my girlfriend. She's going to be taking me out to dinner. Um, and I'm alive and healthy for another day, another year. I've stuck around this long. This is what way longer than I ever imagined I'd be on this earth. And yeah, I'm just kind of excited to see what it brings, and I'm trying to just like mute the conversation in my head and just let whatever happens next, and like all I can control is, how I react to whatever's in front of me. And it also doesn't hurt that, like, you're seeing me for the first time, like, and the lighting is not good in here, but like, you don't look 46. I don't look 40. I get carded for cigarettes sometimes still. And like like that's incredible. Like,
Yeah,
it is what it is.
yeah. We live in a time where people are living longer and looking better, and we are through technology and just and more awareness, and also genetics. Like, there's my mom is 70 and looks like she's maybe 50. So chalk it up to moms passing down that DNA to your boy.
yeah, it's like it's usually on a birthday you get gifts, but I'm sending like 5 gifts to my mom tomorrow. So I'm right on the same page with you.
As you should, man, as you should. Well, Sam Grittner, Grittner, am I pronouncing your last name correctly? I didn't even ask you
Yeah,
before. Um,
no, that's correct.
I'm excited to have you on the podcast. I don't know how I stumbled on you. Oh, so I write articles sometimes, or I write articles. I post sometimes in on this website called Medium, which has really great articles that anybody can really post in, and Barack Obama posts on Medium. And I just typed in suicide to see what anybody has been writing about suicide. And the first thing that one of the first articles to pop up was yours that you wrote in 2015, titled "A Funny Thing Happened When I Was Typing My Suicide Note." So I clicked it. And I was like, "What's the funny thing?" Because for my listeners out there, you're also a comedian and a writer, and so I was like, "What's this funny thing?" And then as I'm reading it, I was like, "Whoa!" And I'm just like taking notes, and I'm completely blown away. Sam, can you take us back to 2015? This is 2022, but talk us through what was going on at the time you're writing this note, and what happened after.
Yeah, I'm happy to do so. I've had anxiety and severe depression since I was 11 years old, diagnosed. I've been on medication for it for most of my adult life. I'm also a recovering alcoholic and drug addict. And I am currently sober and active in my recovery, which is beautiful. At the time that I wrote that, I think I was very high on weed because that's my drug of choice. But basically, for most of my 20s and early 30s, like I was that guy who would drink too much. And it's such a fucking weird card to play. Am I allowed to curse on here?
Yeah, it does limit who can hear, but yes, you can.
Well, I can. I have a big vocabulary, so I can work around that too. Um, I was just in a really bad headspace where I was the person, or maybe I don't know if this is like a general characteristic that you'll find in like a group of people, but I would eventually drink enough where I would threaten or tell my friends, my good friends, like I'm just going to kill myself. That was my constant refrain because and a lot of this is looking back like in retrospect, like I was in a ton of pain, but a lot of it was self-caused with drugs and not really treating depression. I also found out that like 3 years ago, I have something else on top of like the depression anxiety where when I drink or use, it basically throws gasoline on any thoughts of suicidal ideation. And so basically, I had been telling myself forever that if things got bad enough, I would kill myself. And so I sat down one night and I
Wait, I'm sorry,
started
Sam.
writing.
What is that thing? You said you have a thing that it throws gasoline on it. What's the thing?
Oh, it's just a diagnosis. There's a medical diagnosis that like substance, like I have a predisposition for suicidal ideation. Uh, but more like I guess the bigger picture is if I use drugs or alcohol, that increases those thoughts. It turns the volume up to 11. And so I sat down at my desk and started handwriting out a note because especially as a comedian and middle child, I'm very important. I know you know this. That's why I'm on the podcast. I'm obviously extremely important. And so I was like, well, I can't just leave this world without like putting my thoughts on paper about why this world is so messed up and just giving an explanation about why I did what I did. And so I started writing it out, and I looked at it and I was like, this is chicken scrawl, like, because my handwriting's terrible. And I'm like, nobody can read this. And so I was like, all right, like, go to boot up the laptop. And then I am like on like Word or whatever, I'm like, okay, I'll just write it on my computer. And the cursor is just blinking over and over again, because in my head, I'm like doing the most irrational and logical things at the same time. I'm trying to figure out what is the right font for a suicide note. And like, I spent like 20 minutes, and it's like I mentioned in the essay or the article, I'm like Times New Roman, like, come on, like that's too basic. And wingdings is crazy. So it's just going to be like football, cabin. Like those aren't really last thoughts. Those are just things. And then I ended up, I think, on Comic Sans, because I like irony. And the joke there is that the world would soon be sans, a comic for all my Latin heads out there, without a comic. And I sat down, and one thing I've been very good at over the years is not holding back. And when I talk about mental health, when I talk about my suicide attempt, when I talk about drug use, I have a gift in the sense that I don't have much of a filter. I've gotten better about like just not making it my personality, and making it, especially with sobriety, like not like going up to strangers at a party and be like, I'm sober, blah, 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 blah. And like attacking people kind of. But I started writing out the note, and by the end of it, like, I went to print it out and my printer died, and I was getting mad at my printer. I was like, how could you? I was depending on you. And then I was like, the irony that I'm mad that my printer killed itself or stopped working. Like, and it was baffling to me. And the thing about, for me, like with suicidal ideation or suicidal thoughts, is like, over the last year, I've been so lucky. I've had maybe 3 really bad days. But back then in 2015, this was an everyday occurrence. It was sometimes multiple times a day. But my moods would just go up and down so much, just this roller coaster that would go from space to deep oceans type levels. And by the end of writing it, I was like, you know what? Like, I'm just gonna watch some Nathan For You, and like have some pie. Like, it left, and like that all happened. And so I just put that into the essay. And looking back, like, it makes for a great stand-up set. It's just, the contradictions of it is something that's really hard to wrap my head around sometimes, where I can see selfishness and arrogance and the dramatizing that I'm prone to do kind of instinctually, unless I call myself out on it, catch it. And again, like, I don't really care. I've gotten a lot better about this, but I never was worried about like, oh, if I share this, like, will I be able to get a job? Like, I just put it out there, and it was really well received. I think it was one of my like top read posts on Medium, and I think another essay or article that you're going to reference, like, the most beautiful thing that's come out of it is that I've had people, because you're not the only one. Like, I'm sure if you're listening to this podcast, then like hearing someone like, I'm just going to type in suicide and see what's happening. Like, I don't think that's most people. I could be wrong. I think it's more than people think or let on. But it really resonated. And I have had people, because I've written subsequent articles about my mental health and suicide attempts, people reach out to me and tell me that they Googled, like, I'm going to how to kill myself or suicide note. And then they ended up reading my article. And I have like a couple of people that have told me they were going to kill themselves and they stopped because they read that, and they were able to pause the demons for that night. And then the next day they were able to reassess and they were good. And I've stayed in touch with a couple of them. And like, that's like, you talk about like 40, like, or like, there's nothing more I want out of my life than having done that. And that's not to brag, like, at all. I just, it's a series of random circumstances, and the internet being just, it can be this such, I don't know if it can be a bad place sometimes. It can be kind of toxic. And the upside is it can be amazing. It can be a lighthouse for people that are really going through it. And I've been through it. I have gone through it, the grind, the self-doubt so many times. And I've read works from other people, especially for me, just about recovery, that have given me hope, because I've been in and out of recovery for 7 years. And I had a year, and I had 2 years. And then right before the pandemic, I was coming up on another year back. So almost like 6 years. I'm currently a year and some change completely sober. But like, people that I've read that I respect, and sometimes just absolute strangers, it just, you connect with somebody on a visceral level with their writing style. And it has the possibility of changing someone's life, or just getting them to look at what they're going through a different prism. And that to me is key, just on a day-to-day basis for me, for my own just understanding of life and how I approach it.
Yeah, the day to day, really, when we're talking about addiction and recovery, it's about one day at a time. Is there something that you do every day to kind of ground yourself or maintain your sobriety? Like, do you have a routine? Are you in AA? Do you pray? Like, what's your, like, how do you start your mornings and end your days?
I started by blowing up 150 watermelons. I'm really into demolition. And then that's an attempt at a joke. I'm spiritual. I don't want to get too into it, but I will say that I pray to something greater than me. When people hear recovery and hear the word God, that was a big turnoff for me for a long time. And I'm at a place in my life where I just pray to something greater than me. That's rainbows. That's the Force in Star Wars. That's a lake. That's a sunset. And yeah, I do have a morning routine. I get down on my knees. I pray. I eat a good, healthy breakfast. I call my sponsor. I am in a program of recovery that may or may not have 2 letters in it. I don't speak for that organization. I want to make that very clear. I've just found it incredibly helpful. I do go to meetings at least 3 to 4 times a week. I have a sponsor, and that's kind of all I don't want to. I used to talk a big game about the program of recoveries that I've been in, and then I would relapse, and I don't want to turn anyone off from that. So I want to keep it just a little vague, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I also read in the article you talked about, going to therapy twice a week. Are you still doing that?
My girlfriend is amazing. She has been working on herself and has been going to therapy. And I think about a month and a half ago is when I started it again. So I have it once a week on Wednesdays. I have a job where I'm able to block off an hour and just do that via Zoom. I'm definitely a big believer in, just because things are going well doesn't mean they can't be going better. I've definitely, for most of my life, would wait until the excrement hit the fan and then be like, oh, I need to take steps. And I'm in a place now where it's like, okay, like, I'm working a program actively. I'm watching what I eat as much as I can. I'm trying to get physical exercise. but is there more? Can I adjust my medications? That was a big thing for me 2 years ago, where we changed up the prescription that I was on for anxiety and depression. And I had this incredible psychiatrist or psychologist that said, like I switched to a different product and it was working wonders. And she said, well, we can double the dosage. And I was like, why would you do that? It's already working. She's like, well, it could actually work better for you. And that ended up being the case. And so that's the same thing now with therapy, where it's just like, what else can I add to my toolkit? And that's something that I'm lucky enough to have. I have health insurance through the day job that I have. But I went to sliding scale therapists for a long time. And anyone out there who doesn't have a lot of money, that's something that, like, it takes a little work, but you can find a therapist. And I find it extremely helpful, even though I do all this other work. It's just like, well, what else? I'm always open. And so I told her I'd try it, and it's been helping. It's been helping with our relationship, and then just how I interact with the world on a day-to-day basis.
When I hear, because earlier you mentioned when you started drugs and alcohol when you were about 11, I believe. Is this something that your parents indulged in also?
No. So I started smoking pot around, I think, 14, maybe 13. Um, I was basically I think I was a sophomore. So maybe it was even like 15, 16. But my parents had, like, they told me like that they had done smoked pot in the past. And my mom got drunk when I was like 12 or 13 one night and was like, oh, I did magic mushrooms. But like, my parents would drink, not to excess. There was alcoholism on both sides of my family that I was aware of. But like, my older brother, like, was smoking pot before I was, and he doesn't have he's not addicted to this stuff in the way that I get. And so it snowballed really fast. Like, I was smoking a oney with weed when I'm like 15, and then within 2 years I was at the senior bowling party and I had cocaine, ecstasy, blunts. Like, I was rolling pretty heavy, and thought I was just the king and just balling out. And it's like, in retrospect, I was going to the bathroom by myself. No one else wanted to indulge, and it was a really, like, isolating place in retrospect.
Yeah, addiction can definitely be isolating, and then especially with the emotions that come with it, the shame and the guilt. And then you're still a teenager, so your hormones are in such a flux that everything is 10 times more intense at that age, because I mean you just have natural drugs coursing through your body. The How did your parents respond to were they trying to get you in therapy? Was it their suggestion? Because you said you've been on medication from a young age also. How was their support around you getting the help that you needed at that age?
My parents have always been, I'm so blessed. They've been so incredibly supportive. I had, I think around age 11, had some suicidal thoughts, and I mentioned it to my parents. And within like a week, I was seeing a therapist weekly. I was taking Prozac. So they've been super supportive. Um, but they also, at the same time, they let me live my life and make my own decisions and mistakes. And um, I, especially as when you're a teenager, you think you're going to live forever. You think nothing can stop you. Um, and I was just very adamant that I was going to do what I was going to do. My parents made it clear that if I continued to smoke pot in their house, I had to move out. And so I moved out, I think, when I was 17, 18, got my own place and made it work for just, it was always just, it was a house of cards that a light breeze could blow over, or a sneeze from myself. But it was very janky, this duct taped house of cards that I had. But my parents have been supportive this entire time. And especially when I was in a psych ward, they were able to put up money to pay for Cobra insurance to make sure that I got like the best care possible. And so I can't say enough about their support for me.
Before I ask you about the psych ward, because I know I have so many listeners who have maybe thought about admitting themselves and are perhaps hesitant due to the negative publicity that it receives in a lot of mainstream media. At age 11, you report having suicidal thoughts. Through therapy, what have you uncovered in terms of what is it that you really wanted to end, or what were you thinking or feeling? Did you feel like a burden to your parents? Did you feel abandoned? Was there abuse? What was happening?
I definitely felt like a burden. I definitely felt like uh, I was different than everyone else around me. That I was very emotional and empathetical, or had a lot of empathy. Um, but ultimately, the biggest thing when I look back is that I didn't know who I was. And I was afraid of, I thought I was a bad person. That's what it constantly came back to, was there was a voice in my head saying, you're a bad person, you're not worthy of X, Y, and Z. And ultimately, and very quickly, it became, you're not worthy of life or a good life. So I would turn to drugs and alcohol to drown that out as much as possible. But then at a certain point, it ends up fueling that fire. Um, so that's kind of the short answer to that, is that when I look back at all of this, it was, I didn't know who I was. I'm 6'3". I used to, like, I've gained weight over the past couple years, but I was like a buck 35 for most of my adult life, like just gaunt, skinny. I was proud of that. Um, and like, I had braces for 7 years. I had acne, I had back knee, I had bad knees. I wasn't into sports. I and that's another thing, like for young people out there, like I looked at it, I was like, oh, that's for jocks. And like now, like on the eve of 40, um I do my best. Like I might be getting a personal trainer, like just like the physical exercise, like exercise and being in physicality, like helps your mind so much, just like you're watching your diet. Like all these things are interconnected. But at the time, it was just ego, where I was like, oh, I'm better than those jocks because i'm I started out as like a theater nerd, and I was doing really well in school, and then I started doing improv in high school, and I was like, oh, and then smoking pot. I was just like, oh, this is just what comedians do. Like they they need to do drugs. And I think our society has shifted a lot in that mindset, where it's like, the idea of the tortured artist is, it equals a great artist. And it's if there's anything I could go back and tell myself in a time machine, it would be buy Apple stock. And then also, that's not true. Like it's complete, it's the reverse. Like I do my best creating when I'm of sound mind and just present. And yeah.
Yeah, the research shows that when we are depressed, especially if we are in a major depression, we actually are not able to create. But if we're in a melancholy state or manic or in a neutral state, we can create from those places. But great depression does not yield great art at all. You just everything just feels too heavy and too much at that state. So I appreciate you highlighting that. When you
Yeah,
talk
it's really
about, go ahead.
go I was just gonna say, it's really hard to write a masterpiece when you can't even get out of bed.
Yeah,
Like, that's it.
absolutely, absolutely. And so going back to feeling like a burden, can you peel back the layers more on that? And I'm asking because as a kid when I was 9, I felt like a financial burden. Like my mom's life would be better if she hadn't had me. Like she would have more money and she can travel and see the world and do all those things if she wasn't spending her time. raising me and spending her resources and finances on taking care of me. What and when you look at feeling like a burden, what were the thoughts? What were the feelings? What was going on at that time?
It was definitely a different um, feeling for me. It was more, I'm the middle of three boys. My parents did the best they could. My brother is incredibly smart. He was an overachiever, and I was constantly comparing myself to him. And I think, like I don't want to ever blame my parents, but for anything, they did the best they could. But I think at times there was an expectation where it's like, your older brother is doing all this, why are you not able to do it? Like, and for me, then I interpret that as, well, am I lazy? Am I stupid? Because I'm trying really hard. And then I found out at some point that my brother has like a photographic memory. And it's like, that's the cheat code of life, man. Like, I don't have that. Like, and I don't know, like I've never been diagnosed with ADD, but like I would read the same, especially in math and science. Like I clicked with literature, and like I love reading and all that. So like that was easy. But like math and science, I would just read the same pages over and over again and then be like, I'm not retaining any of this. It's just like imagine like putting a sponge underwater, but none of the water is getting collected. Like it's just not doing anything. And so there was a lot of compare and despair. And um, then the longer I was around, I would just have emotional outbursts. And I, it was a drag. It was a drag on my friends. It was a drag on my family. Like anyone I came in contact with, I would end up kind of, in my mind, dragging them down because I didn't feel like I had value or worth. And then I would say that, and it was just this like domino effect or cyclical effect where I would say these things and then they would become true. I would manifest them in a weird way. And so it was just tied up a lot in, for me, like academia. Like I got like I think a 1500 or something on my SATs. Like I was like smart, but I also wasn't as, I'd never be as smart as my older brother, and I thought that was something that was wrong with me for the longest time. And it turns out like we're just built different. Like I love him. He can't tell a joke to save his life. Like that's a gift. Like writing like essays that like connect with people. Like, and again, it's not like shots fired at him. It's just like he and I are different people, and that's, it's all good. But like coming to that has taken so, like decades of therapy and introspection and making mistakes and like just getting brutally honest with myself.
Yeah, because and I love that you mentioned your parents asking you, "Why can't you be more like your brother? Why can't you be more like that?" And when you're a kid and you don't have the answers to that, your default is then, "I am a bad person. I
Yes.
must not be worthwhile because my brother, we come from the same parents, we have the same genes, so we're in the same household, and we're it seems like we're all doing the same things. And then, as you said, you each were gifted with a different talent, and really, that's a question your parents should be asking, because I have so many listeners who do have parents who are, I experienced that the same. Like I have a younger sister, and my mom would often compare myself to my younger sister, more so where it was like, why can't my sister be more like me, kind of thing.
Hmm.
And we're just built differently. We have different skill sets. So when was there a religious upbringing? Because usually when I think of good and bad, I think of the church and and going were you Catholic? What was what was the religion?
No, it was my mom is a proud, like loves to say she's a proud ex-Catholic. My dad is I would say militantly atheist. And I don't know if I'm misremembering this memory, but I feel pretty clear that I think when I was like 12 or 13, like right before I got into drugs, I asked my dad, like we went to a Unitarian church in St. Paul, Minnesota, and Unitarianism, for those who aren't familiar, the best that I, or at least the way I experienced it, it was very much a buffet of all these other, like every other religion, and it was very just like take and choose what you like from these other ones and make your own thing. It's kind of like a Build-A-Bear for spirituality. Um, and I think like we went there for 2 years, and then one day my older brother and I conspired, and we're like, we're gonna trick our parents into, or tell them like we don't want to go. And we sat my mom down. We're like, Mom, we're not going to church anymore. What do you think about that? And she was like, that cool, that's fine. And so we just didn't go after that. And then when I remember asking my dad, to get back to the memory I was talking about, I said, what happens when you die? And I don't, again, like this is blurry, but the way that I remember it is that he said, you die. And I was like, what happens after that? And I think he said they, again, like this sounds so harsh, but like they throw dirt on you. Like that's it. And so that definitely ties into me, where there was this lack of spirituality where, okay, so if there is no heaven, there is no afterlife, then all I've got is now. So why not party it up and make the most of it and have as much fun and live every night like it's Friday or Saturday night, because none of this ultimately matters. I'm not being judged on anything. And so I definitely, and like, that's the way that I interpreted that. And, again, like I'm not here to cast blame or aspersions on my parents. They did the best they could. But if I ever have kids, I will definitely approach that question differently, where it's like, I don't know, but like, what do you think? Like that to me is a really interesting, like, or a better approach than just like, oh, you decompose and worms eat you. Nothing matters. Do you want to listen to death metal? Like that's kind of like the vibe that I got.
Yeah, and I know I'm asking a lot about your parents, but I am so fascinated with not only our story, but how the stories that we have about ourselves connect to the stories that our parents had about themselves, and then so on and so forth, and going so far back. What in your parents' history do you think resulted in the kind of stoicism that your father had, and how your mom also responded to your mental health?
Um, my dad was just raised in an atheist household, and from my understanding, it was very, like you said, like that's the ding 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 word of the day for that household is stoic, which is you didn't really show your feelings, you didn't show emotion. And so I think that trickled down to him, and he did his best. He's done some amazing work over his lifetime in becoming a lot more emotional and vulnerable, but it's still really hard for him. And then on my mom's side, um, uh, there's just a lot of I don't want to speak out of turn. I don't really know why she, like the specifics on why she left the Catholic Church, aside from it was not for her. I think she's a little bit more spiritual than my dad. But at the same time, um, ultimately, like that's one big facet of all this. But then you asked about their reaction to my mental health, and and like all this negative stuff with that, like that response was beautiful. And I that comes from the fact that they are both extremely empathetic and caring people, and just wanted me to be happy. And that's something my mom has told me my entire life is I just want you to be happy, and feel like. And then for me, conversely, it's like I didn't realize at the time, and I think a lot of addicts don't realize this until it's, I don't want to say too late, but because it's never too late. But um, I thought I was only harming and hurting myself with my actions, and that is just not the case. I the echoes and ripple effects of my using, of not showing up as a good brother, of showing up stoned at Christmas, of not remembering birthdays, or um, having an emotional outburst at my older brother's wedding and kind of like not ruining it, but putting a big blotch on it. Like, I was convinced for a long time that like I'm only hurting myself. And that's just something that, like, one of the things I love right now about my life is that my mom keeps saying, like, I don't have to worry about you. And the fact that I had put that burden on her for so long breaks my heart in a lot of ways. But it's also, that's a living amends that I get to do every day. Is every day that I'm doing and taking care of myself and showing up for myself, by default, I'm showing up for her in this really beautiful way.
I would imagine, having a father who is stoic and you being born very empathetic. Did you kind of feel like an outsider in the family? Like, were your brothers more stoic, or were they as empathetic as you?
That's a really great question, Leo. Um, I mean, at the time, I think, like, if I'm thinking back to my mindset of my early teens, or late teens rather, um, I do feel, at least in my mind, I thought I was more empathetic. Um, it's That's a really gnarly question. It's a really tough one for me to answer, just because I definitely don't want to speak on behalf of them. But like, they they were very empathetic and caring. I think I had no emotional self-control. That was the difference, is that they were just as caring, and still are, like very incredibly empathetic people. Um, I just, it goes back to like, what was I feeling at the time, and like growing up, and this lesser than. And that's something that it's still, even like with all the labels that I put on, like, why did I feel the way I feel, or how, what were the emotions, like, that's something that's still kind of intangible, where it's like, I just was emotionally out of place, and like it was just overwhelming. And like you talked about before, with just like going with peaks and valleys of being extremely manic at times, and being like, oh, I can help the world and this and that, to the next day, or even the same day, just being in the pits and being like, I'm worthless, I don't matter. um so I don't know, that question kind of got away from me, but like, I just don't want to speak on their behalf, or put words in their mouths or whatever.
No, no, that makes sense, and I definitely want to go back to you're 6'3", you're 135 pounds, and I would imagine, because you talked about expectations, so you have the expectation from your mom of why can't you, why aren't you more like your brother? But then there's also I would imagine, societal expectations of you're 6'3", right? And so
Yep.
everybody's expecting you to want to play basketball, football, and
Yes,
what kind of
sir.
sport do you play? And you're like, I want to study Shakespeare. Like, how did that? Well, I mean, were you picked on? Was that, or was it acceptable for the circles that you were in? Like, what was that like for you to look one way and have people perceive you as one thing, and but inside you have an entirely different world going on?
Like, honestly, I lucked out. Like, I went to St. Paul Central High School. I graduated in the year 2000. That was the best thing that ever happened to me. It's what got me into comedy. Um, and I think what was my greatest asset was also like one of my biggest downfalls, which was I was a chameleon. And so I would just always change who I was depending on who I was with. And so I was friends with, like, it was just a really diverse school: straight, black, white, Hispanic, gay, non binary. It was so progressive. This is the year like 19, from 96 to 2000. They had a daycare for kids of the high school students. Like, and it was like 2,000 plus students, and it was a melting pot. And like, you know, like there was definitely some homophobic and gay slurs thrown my way, but that's it. I've never been in a fight. And I, you know, like I said, like it's this thing where it's like I was able to adapt. I forgot, but like I was like not homecoming king, but my sophomore year, like I was like picked for the homecoming whatever title of royalty it was. Like I was like I used to look back and be like, oh, high school was like really tough, and it's like people liked me, but I didn't like me because I did, again, it just keeps coming back to, I didn't know who I was. So I'll just pretend, I'll fake it till I make it. But while I'm doing that, I'm just drowning in self-doubt. And yeah, I think it's just, you know, it'd be really easy for me to say, oh, I was beat up and this and that. Like, but that's not the truth. And like, I'm a straight white guy in, you know, in the early aughts or whatever. Like, that's a pretty easy existence. Like, and the expectations for me, like when I told my family that I was going to do comedy, they were just like, that's awesome. Like I had this big speech prepared to tell my parents. And I was like, what do you think about that? I'm not going to go to college. And they were like, we love and support you. And later on, I was like, oh, I think I'd like, because they helped my brother with college a little bit. I saved them like $100,000 with that sentence. But everybody had always been supportive of me. And so it's definitely like anyone who's getting into comedy now, like, I'm so torn. Like, I'm glad people don't really ask me for advice because like getting into stand-up was the best thing that ever happened to me. And it was also one of the worst things because I thought I was more important than other people. I thought I was the most important voice in the room, the inflated sense of self. And then the idea that, I mean, it is being able to speak publicly, as you know, is a gift. And I'm at the point now where like I hear like coworkers telling me like they like get scared to present in front of the company. And I'm like, it just does not compute for me. And the ease and ability with which I can go on a stage or just talk publicly about anything, like it's intoxicating. And especially like if you don't have your ego in check, it will eventually catch up with you. And that's definitely what's happened a number of times in my life, number of times.
Yeah, it's definitely a drug to get that dopamine, that oxytocin,
Yeah.
the serotonin, endorphins, all of that from speaking on stage. I mean, of course, once the adrenaline dies down and the cortisol levels lower, tell me more about this ego grandiosity because it's so fascinating that because I see this in myself and I hear it from other people who struggle with addiction and suicide ideation. There's this back and forth of like shame and guilt, like I'm a bad person and there's low self worth. And then on the flip side, there's this ego and grandiosity of like I'm better than everyone else. How do you how do you keep that pendulum more in the middle versus it swinging from one end of the spectrum to the other, or do you just let it swing?
I have definitely been able to find a really good balance. And that like is because of all the mistakes that I've made, but the fact that over time I've learned from them. And um, I think it's just what you brought up is one of the most fascinating things in the world. Where, on the one hand, I used to go up on a stage and either do really well. Well, yeah, let's just say for the sake of this, like I would do really well, go home, and then, like you said, like the serotonin and the dopamine runs out, and then I'm stuck with myself. And then it's like, well, let's put drugs in here to cover this up. And for me, like the biggest thing about just like mellowing it all out and finding a balance is coming to a couple of conclusions. The first one is I used to tell myself that every show was that like this is it. This is the most important show of my life. Whatever, like the show that night was it. And this idea of like, if I just kill at the right place at the right time, I'll get discovered and I'll be an overnight success. And the truth of the matter is, like, there is no overnight success. Like, anybody who's great at stand-up has been doing it for a long time and has failed so much. And that's the whole trick of stand-up comedy, is it looks like it's off the cuff, but it is not for the most part, like, aside from a few really gifted people. And so when I come to terms with the fact that, okay, this show actually, it doesn't really matter to me, like, in the big picture, it doesn't matter. And so if I like, and then it also, like, I'm getting really hyped and excited about this because I have a lot of thoughts on it. And like, the other thing that I really want to talk about is the idea of the validation that I get from the audience used to inform my view on myself. And so if I killed that night, oh, look at the God King. Look at Zeus, who's decided to treat everybody by coming down from Mount Olympus. Oh, you want a thunderbolt, little guy? There you go. There you go. And then if I did horrible, I go home. I'm the worst. Like, let's write a chicken scrawl note about how I want to die and listen to really sad music and drink whiskey and wonder why I'm depressed, which is just a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so I'm at this point now with comedy where I don't care what you think about me. I know I'm funny. I've been doing this long enough where if I go on stage, I am going to do really well. If you get on board my train, congratulations, you're on the winning team. If it's not for you, I accept that and I respect that. You're wrong, but I'm not going to put up a big, I'm not going to make a to-do out of it. Like, it just is what it is. And it's this beautiful thing where it's like, it's a zero sum, it's no longer, there's no value attached to it. And so so that actually makes me a better performer, because the more you're putting pressure on yourself, the more you get in your head, versus if you go on stage and you're just like, I'm just going to go out and let it fly. This is just one of many shows that I will do. For me personally, that's the most freeing stuff in the world. It's incredible.
You're right. This because a lot of times when we have this, depressive brain, we make everything all or nothing. It's either like this is going to be the best show, or that was the worst show, or and we put too much emphasis on everything that we do, um, and
Yes.
it takes the fun out of it. It takes the joy, and the reason why we really got into it. And then no show is really ever satisfying enough. We're always like digging for more when we go through life like that. The going talking about the psych ward, can you talk to us about well, one, how many times were you in there? And then what suggestions would you give for someone who is going into the psych ward for the first time?
I got my punch card punched 3 times. I went to a psych ward involuntarily the first time, and I was using, and I had relapsed, and I was drinking again, and I was like, I'm going to go out, and I'm going to tell them everything they want to hear, and then I'll go back out, and everything will be fine. And so I think I was released within 2 weeks. And a week later, I was back, and like some of the nurses were like, "Weren't you just?" I'm like, "Yep, I was just here. You guys know how I like my breakfasts." And this is obviously a very serious topic, and so I'm definitely. I assume the audience knows that, like, when I make jokes about this stuff, it's a very dark subject, or it's heavy. It's very heavy, and so, like, I might try and make it a little more light, but I guess I'll try and strike the balance here and say, like, I've never been asked that question before. And that's an incredible question about what advice would I give to someone. I just want to backtrack and say the third time I went voluntarily. The second and third time, I admitted to a therapist I was having suicidal thoughts. And I made that choice going in. Like, I knew that if I said that to my therapist, that she has the obligation to put me in, at least for the evaluation. And it's a very, like, I forget which hospital I went to in New York. It's not the worst. There are some really gnarly ones out there. And I'll just say, it's not fun. Like, I've never heard anyone say like, oh, like one of the highlights of my life was like, or just like, I had the most like, sleepaway camp, and getting to meet one of my celebrity people that I've always loved, and then staying at the psych ward. Those are the most fun times of my life. You're not going there to have fun, but you're going there to save your life. And that's what I know for a fact on two of those occasions, I would have hurt myself, because this is after I had attempted suicide by trying to overdose on pills that I'd saved up. And my advice is, if you're able to have friends or family members that support you, bring books, or if you're able to even bring books ahead of time, because there's not a lot to do in there. And so you are stuck with your thoughts. They do their best to structure out a day, but you don't have your phone. And especially in this day and age, like at the time I was tweeting all the time. And so it was this really big shift in how like my day-to-day was, where it's like you have no access to the internet. But I would draw, I would do a lot of reading. And then like, I think like, if you're going to be there, like you're there no matter what. And like at a certain point, like there are circumstances where you don't get to leave until they say you do. And so throw yourself into the activities. So I did that. I would show up, and like, I think the second and third time is when I was like, you know what, I'll go to like group today and I'll be honest. And like with everything in life, the more brutally honest you are with yourself, the more you will succeed. It's the toughest thing to do, but the dividends that you get, it's like it's tenfold. What you put in versus what you get out is insane. And it's not going to be fun, but it'll save your life. And like I said, like the biggest takeaway I want from this is like, after going there, and like it can be a scary place. I saw some stuff that was very, very intense, but I still chose to go back a third time because I knew it would prevent me from hurting myself. And so but then like I also have an extremely supportive family that would call me, that I could call, and I had people that would come and visit me. And like, that's incredible. Like the people like that also showed me some of who my real friends were, who like came and visited me in a psych ward. There's still stigma attached with that. And people like you don't have soda, you don't have chocolate, but outsiders are allowed to bring you that stuff. And like, I'll never forget the friends who showed up and called and answered my calls. Like those are forever friends. And my family, just like, I can't say enough about them for how much love they showed me during that time.
You know, being in there and, depression, suicide, how do you distinguish for yourself the difference between being depressed and the suicidal thoughts? How does that feel different to you, or how are the thoughts different to you?
Depression to me is just malaise, feeling unmotivated, like just genuinely like, versus like suicidal ideation is, there is a voice in my head that the volume gets cranked up all the way, and it's just the same like one line on a record on repeat over and over again, or like, you're worthless, you're stupid, you'll never get better than this, you don't deserve to live. And it's just that on a constant loop. Versus depression is just a lot more, it's in a way it can be scarier because it creeps up on me or in the past, it would creep up on me where I didn't really see it coming, versus like suicidal ideation. It's like when you see like the storm clouds coming, like I know what's coming, like when it starts to come on. And so much of my life now is like preventative measures, like we talked about at the beginning, where it's like having a routine, like reaching out to a higher power, making sure that I'm eating right, that I'm doing my best to exercise, that I take my meds every day, that I do therapy, and then that I'm active in my recovery. And by doing all of that and showing up for myself, that's preventative care that has taken away, like I said at the beginning, like I've had 3 days which of like where I had thoughts of suicide, where I was like, oh, like I am like really heavy. But at the same time, that to me is a miracle, because from 15 to 35, that was every day of my life.
One of the things I love, because I read a few of your other articles on Medium, is that when you talked about your addiction, and I would assume you're doing the same thing with your suicidal thoughts, the most important thing, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that you stop pretending that you didn't have an addiction. You stop pretending that you didn't have suicidal thoughts. And as a result, you started reaching out to people and voicing what you were experiencing of like, I'm really craving, this drug, or I'm really struggling with these suicidal thoughts. Can you tell me more about that? And am I interpreting that correctly?
You're definitely interpreting that correctly. Like that's the name of the game, is don't wait for stuff to build up and bottle up and hide your feelings and try and put on this game face or put on airs for friends and family or for anyone, where it's just like, here's what I'm going through. Like my best friend Patrick, I call him once a week and we just talk for an hour, and just like that's its own form of therapy. And for recovery, I'm at a point now where I don't get cravings very often, which is one of the greatest blessings in my life, but I still do get them. And it's like pot is the monkey that will forever be on my back, especially with the way that it's changed in our society and become less destigmatized. And I'm pro legalization. Like I just like I can't do it. But the other thing is like it all comes back to me for like, and this is really corny, but whatever. Like the idea when I saw 8 Mile and Eminem, and like the idea of when you're going into a rap battle or whatever, and before anyone can put their diss out, I put it all out and I embrace my flaws. That was when I wrote about my suicide attempt, that changed my life forever. That was the best, that was the scariest and the best decision that I have ever made in my life, because I did like that was like there's no coming back from that when you publish like, hey, I tried to kill myself. Here's why. But also, I'm glad, like, there's so much vulnerability and so much possibility for blowback. Like, our future employer is going to read this and be like, yeah, like, we can't hire this person. But again, but I found by being open about it and talking about it, like, I'm really happy with the way I talk about it, which is pretty nonchalant, because it is what it, again, so much of it, it is what it is. This is who I am and what my DNA is made out of. And like, for all, I wouldn't be having this conversation with you if I had made every decision that I did. So like when I like something I bring up to like friends or people who like are like going through rough times is like, this too shall pass. This will, you like, whatever is the worst thing in my life right now, like that I'm fixated on, that I'm worried about, a month from now I won't even remember that. And so just looking at a big picture, when I'm able to zoom out, like I'm able to see that every mistake I made, like that, I eventually I was able to learn from it and connect all the dots. And like, that's why I'm here right now having this conversation with you, which hopefully will help. If it, and I know people say this all the time, and like, ironically, like if it helps just one person, that's a miracle. Like, that's what I'm on this earth to do. Like, if I'm able to help somebody have a conversation with a family member, a friend, seek therapy, or just not feel ashamed and say, you know what, I've had suicidal thoughts, and just and take the stigma away. Because that's the thing, is like, you live in this, or at least I'll speak for myself, I lived in this bubble where I said, if people find out about this, I'm going to be weak, I'm going to be laughed at, I'm going to XYZ. And the complete opposite happened. It was a floodgate of love, empathy, and understanding, and people saying, hey man, I went through that too, I relate to that. And it was this conversation starter, and this jump off point. And just for me, like, again, like writing that, when I hit publish, it was the most freeing moment of my life, because that I had just gotten out of the psych ward for the second time, and I saw a friend on the street, and they were like, I was so active on Twitter, they were like, are you okay, like I haven't seen you in a while. And I was like, I was trying to make up a story to like just to lie my way out of it. And instead I broke down crying and I told them the truth. And they were like, I'm so sorry, I didn't know you were going through this. And like, I love you, and let me know if there's anything I can do. And I went home, and I've had a couple occasions where the words just came out of my fingers. I wasn't even looking at the keyboard. Like, it felt like I was a vessel for something greater than me, for it to come out the way it did and have the reverberations that it has. And that's the thing. It's like, again, like I will out checkmate you by coming to the game and saying, like, again, like there's a time and a place for it. Right? Like, you don't just show up to a party like, hey everyone, I tried to kill myself, what's up? But not ever being ashamed of these facts. I can stand proud, and I am proud. And the fact that I don't have to hide any aspect of who I am, there's not a lot of people who can say that. Or I'll just speak for myself. I don't know outside of recovery and like people that I've met through talking about and having these conversations. I feel like so many people just want to put on the game face because that's what they think society demands of them.
What 3 books would you take with you into a psych ward?
Well, this I would definitely just bring like some David Sedaris books, just like some light reading. Like, I'm really right now where I'm at in my life, I love reading about conspiracy theories. That is not what you want to be doing. They won't let you out probably for a good minute if you're being like, let me tell you what about JFK and what really happened. And uh, um, oh yeah, like that's a whole entire rabbit hole. Just stuff that keeps it light. And I love reading biographies, and so finding like just stuff that's light and hopeful. And like, I don't have any examples right now, but like the thing that can't instantly came to mind is like, oh, like Running with Scissors, I think is David Sedaris. And like, just, but at the same time, like maybe a book about like history, like, because it's very dense and it'll keep your mind occupied, and so it'll take your mind away from where you're currently at. So just like light stuff, but also maybe some like history that's not like the history of depression and suicidal ideation. Like, don't, you can take a pass on that one.
Is there any part of your journey that I haven't asked about that you think would be valuable to anybody struggling with, I get emails from people who are losing their house, they're in debt, they're going through a marriage and breakup, and they have some type of health scare. I mean, like, it's like they're just getting it from all 4 corners. Is there
Yeah.
anything, and is there any part of your story that we haven't discussed that you think would be valuable to them?
I think I'll say a couple points, which is I can only speak for myself, because I do understand like my own extenuating circumstances are totally different from someone else's. And what I find to be the heaviest burden can pale in comparison when you look at what other people are going through. That being said, I do think that the evil, depressive, negative voice inside my head, I think anybody who's going through this has the same thing, which is a voice inside your head that sounds exactly like your own, but is not you, that is telling you this is the end of the world. This is it. I will never come back from this. I'll say a couple things. I had to declare bankruptcy when I first moved to New York. I paid off $24,000 in bankruptcy. I didn't pay my taxes because I was at a party and I was high, and somebody was like, when I first moved to New York, this is after I declared bankruptcy, they're like, oh, did you know that the government won't come after you if you don't pay your taxes? And I was like, oh, that's rad. And then I ended up getting my bank account frozen when I was like 29, 30. I had to pay back $18,000 in debt again to the federal government. Not just so I did that with private banks, and I was like, well, let's give this a go with the real people who can like freeze my bank account and have like real consequences. And at the time, I thought I would never get out of debt. I thought I was just trapped. I didn't date very much because I was just afraid to put myself out there. And like, I didn't have sex till I was 21. I thought there was something wrong with me. I just had no self-confidence. And at various points in my life, like when I actually attempted suicide, I was working at a company writing listicles, like BuzzFeed style, like listicles was what they were after. And I was like, this is not what I want to do with my life. This is like, I'm adding to the poison of the culture that I already hate. And I was like, I'll never find a better job than this. And I'm pounding my desk here. I don't know if you can hear it. Every single thing that I just listed out, I was dead wrong about. I am completely paid up. I paid my taxes the last 3 years. The first day that I could file my taxes, I was like, what's up, TurboTax? Boom, boom, bada bing. Got my refund. It actually came to me, which for 8 years, the federal government, I would look at how much money was coming and it went straight to Uncle Sam. And my name is Sam. So it's like, what about Brother Sam? Like, it was just, and now I pay my debts on time. I have my credit card down to, I have like over 750 in the credit score. What? That is living the dream for this dude. And like, again, like I'm turning 40 tomorrow. I'm trying to move out, like, and get my own apartment in New York. Like, I have 5 roommates. And like, again, like I could look at that and be like, I'm a failure. I'm 40 and I still have 5 roommates. And it's like, no, dude, I've laid the foundation over the past year and a half where I'm in a position at my day job where I'm going to get a promotion. I am manifesting it by how I show up every day for work. And I also just have a belief and trust in something greater than me, that I am being taken care of at all times, as long as I continue to be honest, be a good person to the best of my ability. And the biggest last point I will make is that I will make mistakes along the way. I will constantly screw up. And that is not only okay, accepting that, especially in recovery, will get you to where you want to be faster. Because I went to meetings for a year straight and I still relapsed. So by accepting the imperfection of life and just coming to terms that no one does this perfectly, and by saying I'm going to, you're setting yourself up for failure. So that's, as you can see, I don't really have strong feelings about any of that stuff. But
I appreciate you sharing. And then last question, Sam, asks is, first of all, where can people find you? Plug all your things.
I'm in Bed-Stuy, so if you're in the neighborhood, just come by, say hi. I'm of course, that's another attempt at a joke. I'm on twitter.com/my name, which is SamGrittner. Also on Instagram, I have a website, samgrittner.com, that links out to my most popular tweets. It hasn't been updated in a minute, but after this, I think I'm going to, because I'm definitely going to link out to this show when it drops. This has been a really great conversation. So I'm on Instagram. I'm on all social media platforms except for TikTok. Like I'm aged out of that. I would love it if anybody is curious. I'm pretty sure you'll link out to the essays that are here. But I have a lot of stuff on Medium that I'm really proud of. There's a lot of stuff about mental health, recovery, relapsing, and getting back on the horse. And as somebody who attempted suicide outright, and then just through drugs and alcohol, and relapsed so many times, and I'm just doing my best for today. There is hope for anybody. That is the message I want to leave here with. If I'm here today, there's hope for anybody.
I love that. And last question, because I always imagine that there's one person listening in who may be on the precipice of wanting to end their life. Before you kill yourself, what would you say to them, Sam Grittner?
Whatever I would ask, I would share my experience, and like that's hard to do in a sentence, but I have been there. I tried. I thought that I had weighed enough stuff out that I would not wake up. And then to think that you're going to die and then wake up from that is one of the most surreal things that can happen to someone. And I do believe that there is a reason that I'm here today. And that's to share this message, is that I wasn't meant to die. In order for me to share the message that you aren't either, that you intrinsically have value. And my DMs are open. You can hit me up on my Gmail account. I will always do my best to reach out if you're going through it. Like, I'm not here to be your best friend or your therapist, but I can reach out and I will respond. You are valid. And that is something that just our society doesn't tell people enough. You have intrinsic value because you exist. That's it. And I'll hug you.
Thank you so much, Sam. Thank you so much, listeners, for tuning in. Remember, this podcast is not a substitute for you going to get help, for you calling the 1-800-SUICIDE or 1-800-273-TALKS or any of the other phone numbers that are listed. They're international phone numbers. Remember, if you're in Mexico, Guadalajara, if you're in South America, North America, if you're in Europe, Africa, Asia, no matter where you are in the world, there are phone numbers for you. And there are resources to help you pay for if you need to stay at a psych ward or pay for therapists or find a sliding scale therapist. There are resources in each and every single one of the show notes, but you have to make the first step. You can always go to thrivewithleo.com for one-on-one coaching with yours truly. Let's get to tomorrow together. Thank you so much, Sam.
Thank you so much, Leo. I appreciate it. Have a wonderful day.